You're depressed because you're low in Iman. A religious person will never experience mental health issues. Suicide has nothing to do with the Muslim community. When it comes to the topic of faith and mental health, a lot has been said, some of which is correct and some of which needs correcting. To help clear our understanding, today I sit down with Ziyad Serhan, an accredited mental health educator who founded the organization Educaid, which helps enlighten communities on the reality of mental health in the modern world. It was an enlightening discussion and one which I found personally challenging, but at the same time, greatly rewarding. I hope you enjoy the discussion.
I was contacted by someone that you'd probably consider a religious figure, Hafiz of the Quran, attended a prestigious Islamic institution for most of their life. And I was contacted asking, look, I need help. I've got a mental health problem. And the first thing he said was, I am a wreck.
Personally, I know that you never began your professional career in this mental health space. You started off as a high school teacher.
Absolutely.
So what made you make that transition?
Yeah, so I guess a lot of teachers start off in the profession wanting to, change the upcoming generation for the better, right?
Yeah. And,
we have this revolutionary mindset going into teaching, and I think I kind of joined that movement. Yeah. So I slowly started to discover and connect with students at a different level within the classroom, and the connections that were built with these students transcended, the content knowledge around what we were teaching. I can actually recall where students will disclose highly sensitive information in light of things that were happening in the media or things that they were watching on Netflix, for example, and relate it back to their personal experience. But notice that in the classroom, it was a safe space enough for them to express, how they were feeling. So
it was through your interaction with children and the youth and these, teenagers that really made you want to go out and say, hang on, I want to help these people beyond the classroom walls.
Absolutely, yeah. And again, growing up as a young Muslim, part and parcel of our values as a Muslim is not to just think about yourself individually, but to kind of think about other people around you. So kind of having that communal paradigm or perspective in the way we think about others.
Yeah, there's what's that hadith that goes, أَحَبُّ النَّاسِ إِلَى اللَّهِ أَنْفَعُهُمْ لِلنَّاسِ.
SubhanAllah.
The most beloved people to Allah are those who are the most beneficial to people. So I guess that's what shifts into your journey, so to speak, that you wanted to see how I can be most beneficial in terms of dealing with these young people.
Yeah, absolutely. Recounting the events which led up to me making key decisions in my career was my interaction with a particular young Muslim youth. So I was involved in a street outreach program, and this particular boy, he was diagnosed with a psychotic illness, so namely schizophrenia, and he came from a broken home, single parent, and I was put in contact with this young boy to try and help and mentor him. His mum got in contact with me and started asking me, you need to look after this young, you need to look after him. He's Muslim, his, same background. So he came from a similar cultural background to mine. So I felt this extra obligation to want to, to exert energy and effort to want to help him. And then, I slowly started to find, and again, being Muslim and being sincere and having good intention, I jumped in, open arms, and I wanted to help as best as I could. And so I embraced him, and the first week came along and we met and whatnot, and he was really kind of withdrawn, and I feel like he was affected by the side effects of the medication. And one thing that ensued from that point was, I felt like I wasn't getting anywhere with him in terms of my relationship with him or my interactions with him. So it kind of made me think, and then the relationship ended up, it fizzled out, and, hopefully he's doing well now, but I didn't get in contact with him again. And it really left like a gaping hole in my heart, thinking that, hold on, there's an emotional side to what you're doing here, and you're holding yourself to a really high standard.
Wow.
So there was kind of a side effect from the way I thought I needed to help people. And then, fast forward to, when I started teaching, I actually partook in a professional development course, which was the mental health first aid course. And, that's with a light bulb moment. I looked back on that same incident with that young boy that I was helping, and I was like, oh my God, wow, this is exactly what I needed. And it was that introspection to know that as a Muslim, it's not necessarily good intention that's going to get you over the line.
Well, yeah.
It's not that good intention that's going to automatically, allow you to assist someone in the way they need to be assisted.
Yeah.
It was that good intention plus the correct or the right skill set and knowing what your limits are that's going to assist somebody to assist somebody in terms of where they need to be.
I hope you're enjoying the discussion so far. If you haven't subscribed already to our YouTube channel, please do so by clicking subscribe and hitting the bell. Also, if you are enjoying this podcast, please consider heading over to our website at onepathnetwork.com and contributing whatever you can. Any donation will be greatly appreciated. Let's continue. I guess you just you really speak volumes when you speak about that specific incident, because it comes back to, as Muslims, we all have that enthusiasm. We all have that want to help others and really, get involved. You hear someone suffering, you hear someone's going through a bout of depression. Oh, I'm going to help him. I'm going to say this to him, and I'm going to teach him about this and teach him about that. And it's going to, miraculously work wonders on him, and he's going to become good again. But we fail to realize, hang on, man, you've got the good intention, but you also need to empower yourself or equip yourself with the right skill set, knowledge to go out and deal with these issues head on.
For sure.
And this is in no way trying to undermine people's efforts or intentions, because at the end of the day, your good intentions is so valued right now. You're just missing that extra step to go out there.
Absolutely.
Get the extra set of knowledge and extra set of skills, and you can go out and really be, you could really do wonders here. And Ziyad, I know that you actually held a course for imams and those working in faith-based organizations to teach them the skills that they would need, because I'm guessing they would be received with an influx of people with mental health issues. Yeah. So how did that go down?
Yeah. So again, imams and community leaders are like, frontline workers of a different level. They're expected to look after so many of the needs of the congregants that they're in charge of. Per se. So what tends to happen is, and that's a lot of criticism kind of gets thrown the way of imams or community leaders or people of authority in terms of, the way they deal with certain situations, especially in terms of, mental health and mental illness, etc. So, one of the things that we do and we deliver as part of, a service is the mental health first aid program. And that's been received with open arms from the Muslim community.
Yeah, props to the imams first and foremost, because as you said, there's a lot of stigma and I guess a lot of demonization that occurs on social media against imams. Absolutely. But hang on, we're seeing right here that the imams are at the forefront, equipping themselves with the knowledge. So we need to just slow down on the keyboard.
For sure. Again, we need to validate some of those criticisms, but again, it's hard to kind of regulate or limit those criticisms when everyone wants to have their say on social media. But again, 100%, props to the imams that did partake in the course, and even one of the imams was saying that, he believes that it should be a fard, pretty much an obligation for each imam to actually undertake a course like that or an equivalent to be able to kind of understand what that framework is. Because again, part and parcel of the mental health first aid program, that's just one example of the programs we run, is that it equips individuals with that mindset to know where their limits are. Yeah. And that's extremely important, right? You don't want to overstep your mark. Yeah. And either cause someone more detriment to the current situation.
Yeah, it's even Islamically speaking, that's the correct way to do things. I think it was Umar ibn Abdulaziz. He says, may Allah have mercy on the one who knows his limits and he sticks to his limits. So I think that's Islamically speaking, that's the right approach to have. And on saying that, you're dealing with the imams. I'm sure that would have been a bit daunting coming from a student perspective.
It was.
Now you're becoming the teacher of the teachers of the ummah.
Yeah, it was very confronting.
Yeah.
And I had to keep reminding myself and, the mentors around me to keep saying that, you're kind of offering what you're offering within the framework of your knowledge, right?
Yeah.
So it was
You don't
extremely
want to step
rewarding.
on anyone's toes or anything like
Oh
that.
no,
Yeah.
100% not. Yeah, but it was good. I think that was one of the most unique courses I've ever been involved in, because all the case studies and examples that they gave were like, wow, like this stuff you don't often hear of. From our level, right? It's very easy for us to kind of criticize those that are above us, but they also have their own experiences and their own situations that they've had to deal with, and they're not easy. They're not like it's a straightforward approach. There's so many factors to consider.
Yeah, and I guess many of us, we belittle this kind of it's so easy. You just have to say this. Don't say these 10 things and just say this one thing and everything will be perfect. But hang on, man, this is very, very difficult.
Yeah.
So you're dealing with the faith-based workers. What role do you see faith playing when it comes to mental health? I guess we've heard all this. We've heard all the misconceptions at the start of the podcast. Or if you're low in iman, it means you're going to be depressed. But in all honesty, I feel like faith does have a role to play.
Yeah, for sure.
So where do we?
I'm going to start off with a small example, right? And it was very recently, actually. I was contacted by someone that you'd probably consider a religious figure, Hafiz of the Quran, attended a prestigious Islamic institution for most of their life. And I was contacted asking, look, I need help. I've got a mental health problem. And okay, I said, okay, let's chat. So, we picked up the phone and started speaking to this, religious person. And the first thing he said was, I am a wreck. My father destroyed me. And then, I was kind of shocked. That's the first, he exclaimed that nearly. And then I was like, okay, let's just kind of unpack what's going on. And he was saying, look, I'm afraid of speaking to a mental health professional. That's why I'm approaching you in your capacity as an educator in this space, as someone that raises awareness. And I need help. So we kind of had a preliminary discussion, obviously being mindful to kind of stick within my parameters as an educator and not kind of overstepping my mark. And he was mentioning that, or he did mention that during his childhood, he had a very traumatic childhood. His father was abusive, not just to the siblings, but also to the pet, to the mother, and would literally rob them of their self-esteem and their confidence, despite their, despite the fact that they were really intelligent children that were being brought up. And subhanAllah, I was thinking to myself, wow, like if anything, this is a prime example of, of that smashing that stigma around faith versus mental illness, because you had someone that was learned, that was leading prayers daily, Hafiz of the Quran. He was delivering lessons, and he was saying that these the lessons that they would deliver would be affected because of this childhood trauma that's unresolved. He wouldn't have the confidence to. He found it very difficult to deliver those courses and interact with people and individuals because of that lack of security that was provided for them in their childhood, for him in his childhood. And then, and I was just, we went back and forth, etc. I went and kind of consulted a psychologist with regards to, recommending a way forward. And I think one of the biggest barriers for him, which is a side note, which we'll speak about, I guess, soon, the whole idea of stigma and what shapes stigma, was his lack of knowledge around what constituted confidentiality. Like if I go and speak to a psychologist, then my name's going to be put down with the government and it's going to stop me from. So
he was a bit afraid of going.
Absolutely, yeah. So that was like a huge eye opener for me. That was just one. That's one of many examples that I can use in terms of smashing that stigma around faith versus depression, or faith versus mental illness.
So we are seeing that there's, I guess we can say, a line between being someone who is pious and being someone who is depressed. They are not mutually exclusive. You can very well be someone who's pious, but at the same time be someone who's depressed.
Yeah, for
and
sure.
You can be someone who's the opposite as well. But what we're trying to say is, these things do exist even amongst those who are religiously practicing. But Yeah.
Sorry, I was just going to add to that because I was actually listening to a Muslim professional, Muslim mental health professional who who also happens to be a sheikh. And he was saying that when we look at mental health and mental illness and distress, I think sometimes because of the world we're being brought up in, where there seems to be so much perfection online through social media, etc., we often forget that, that people do struggle.
Yeah.
And kind of having that validated, through your faith is a big deal.
Wow.
The whole idea of, that nobody is immune from struggles and hardships. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we know He says in the Quran, وَلَنَبْلُوَنَكُمْ بِشَيْءٍ مِنَ الْخَوْفِ وَالْجُوعِ وَنَقْصٍ مِنَ الْأَمْوَالِ وَالْأَنفُسِ وَالثَّمَرَاتِ, right?
Yeah.
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that He will test us with, with fear. And how interesting, He was saying that the first thing He mentions is based on an emotion, fear/anxiety.
Wow. Yeah.
And, and that's part of the spiritual journey. And having that validated, the whole idea of struggle, whether you're being tested with, a difficult life event or a difficult, obstacle in overcoming with regards to your education or your work, now with the whole economic crisis and whatnot. Yeah, there seems there's going to be what do you say, like a shaking of the foundations in terms of what we rely on to survive as human beings. So how are we going to kind of get through that and understand that, okay, that we need to be able to navigate and embrace these difficulties and these stresses. And faith provides that, faith provides that anchor, if you want to call it, to being able to cope with those situations.
Well, I guess like we can see in certain instances where, faith and mental health are separate, but then at the same time, there are many instances when faith can help someone and assist someone who is suffering, struggling with mental health. I guess, I remember doing a course with you once, and you were saying that one of the contributing factors to, I guess, depression or anxiety was a lack of purpose or having this, or fear. And then when it comes to our faith is there to anchor you, as you said. It's there to give you a purpose. It's there to remind you that, even when times get tough, when there is a struggle, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is there.
Yeah.
And everything is in the hands of Allah. And, although our faith does, I guess I wanted to draw this with you as well. Our faith does tell you, Inna Allaha ma'as sabirin. Allah is with those who are patient. Inna Allah yuhibbus sabirin. Allah loves those who are patient. And then I guess there's a bit of a misconception. People say, "Oh, don't tell people, just be patient." I guess that's an interesting one, but I guess it just depends on a case by case scenario or the exact circumstances of when you do tell someone to just stay patient, because then it can, as you've mentioned, it can backfire.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, the whole idea of of patience isn't just to kind of sit idly by and wait for the cloud to pass.
Yeah.
It's about kind of being proactive in terms of alleviating the distress, right?
Doing what you can within your means.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. And that one hadith that really brings me solace personally and contentment is that one where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said that, عجبا لأمر المؤمن. فإن أمره كله خير. Requote me if I'm misquoting it, but that the believer's affairs are amazing, pretty much paraphrasing, and that if a hardship befalls him, then he's patient, and if something good happens to him, he thanks and he gives shukr to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and for that, like, that's amazing, right? Because it really validates the idea that, and I keep using this word validate, but I think it's important that we don't kind of push it to the side. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us that you will be faced with hardship. If we look at the prophets, alayhimus salam, they were, the epitome of, their da'wah was having to navigate through struggles with their people, with delivering the message, undergoing severe persecution, etc. And, even closer to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when we look at, how he dealt with grief, for example, as one example of how he dealt with a very powerful and strong emotion when his son Ibrahim passed away. He let himself cry and he channeled those emotions towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
SubhanAllah.
Yeah.
No, it's actually it's a beautiful thing, the way I guess we can interplay between our faith and if we do have mental health issues. But if we, I guess, in essence, there is a role for faith, but overall,
Yeah.
overarching, we're saying that, you know, when push comes to shove, when it gets really bad and when things do come into play, we need to have that, I guess, the qualified
100%.
intervention.
Yeah, so if I can just kind of hone in on that a little bit, right? We kind of term religion, you know, or faith as a protective factor from someone falling into the ditch. You know, if we can kind of term, you know, someone that's, you know, mentally unwell that needs the psychological help as someone that's falling into the ditch. You know, the faith provides them not to kind of, well, it contributes to them avoiding falling in the ditch, but it's still possible that they can fall in that ditch.
Definitely.
And when they do fall in that ditch, kind of, you know, seeking the appropriate help to get them back out. That's pretty much how I'd like to look at it. Another example that was, you know, once mentioned to me was, you know, I just imagine that, you know, when someone is mentally unwell, it's like a covering over their, you know, over their mind. And it kind of affects the faith that going in and out. So that's that interplay between faith versus illness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's very interesting. You know, once you lift that veil, which is, you know, it could be like any other illness that's physically harming the body. We're saying this mental illness is also physically or mentally harming the body. And once you just, I guess, treat that, we can allow the faith to come in and assist where need be.
Yeah. I wanted to bring up something important here, which was the terminologies that we often use around, you know, talking about mental health, mental illness, etc. And one activity I love to do actually with my participants, or, you know, the people that I'm delivering the course or a seminar to, is to kind of start off from that very point. How do we often define mental health? And this actually happened. I was facilitating a panel discussion amongst mashayikh and mashayikhat. It's a plural form. Is this mashayikh, right? Yeah, if that's a word. Yeah. Anyways, I was facilitating a discussion, and that's the first question I asked. And I was kind of, you know, being in this space and always, you know, paying close attention to the language that we use goes a long way in terms of breaking down that stigma. And we often use mental health in replacement for mental illness, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I guess I've fallen to that.
Yeah, again, society-wise, we interchangeably use mental health for mental illness. Yeah. But we don't necessarily do that with physical health and physical illness, right? We don't, you know, if I say, how's your physical health, you're automatically going to assume, you know... Are
you going to the gym? Are you
exactly
eating
right.
Yeah.
But if I say, how's your mental health, you're automatically, not you, the general populace, right? They're going to kind of go to the assumption to start answering question, am I depressed? Am I anxious? You know, going through the list of mental illnesses. Whereas when we actually we differentiate that mental health and mental illness are two different things. And when we are talking about our mental health, it's more than just the absence of disease. And when if, for example, we look at the definition from the World Health Organization, what is mental health? They break it down. They say that mental health is a state of well-being where the individual, there's 4 parts, right? Realizes their own abilities, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and are able to make a contribution to their community.
Well, who on earth has mental health after that?
Yeah.
Like that's a very high definition of what...
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And again, like, so be it. That mental health is more than just the absence of an illness. It's not being depressed or feeling suicidal. That necessarily means, I have bad mental health.
Are you feeling well, I guess we can say.
Yeah. Are you feeling well? You can ask, how's your mental health? But for people to assume that it automatically means an illness or the absence of an illness, I think is, it can be slightly problematic. So I guess when we're talking, unpacking the conversation, it's extremely important that we differentiate and we start off with, language. Because language, it shapes the way we communicate. It shapes the way that, perceptions are built, especially in society. And, when relating that back to what we were speaking about before, and accessing support when we do need it, right? Because we were talking about faith and what happens if somebody, do we discount professional help, right? So when we are talking about mental health, mental illness, or mental ill health, we need to also appreciate that just like, if you were to physically become ill and need to go see a doctor, then the same thing happens if you're mentally ill or you fall in that, that zone of not feeling so well. And that's not a fixed state.
Nice. Yeah. So let's let's role play right now.
Okay.
I guess you're a person who teaches people how to deal with people that have mental health.
Yeah, so just
yeah.
a reframe. So I equip the layman, if you
Yeah.
want to call it, you know, through education, how to approach and assist someone that's starting to become unwell. Yeah.
Okay, so for instance, say for example, I know someone who's suffering from a mental health condition. What's the process?
Again,
Should I
yeah.
abstain? Should I avoid? How do we go about this?
I think there's a few key points that you can kind of keep in mind. And again, going back to understanding what your limits are, I think is a great start, right? Yeah, before approaching, you know, knowing what your limits are, and understanding, are you the right person to approach them? Now, you might not necessarily be the best person to approach them, especially if, you know, it's someone that's, you know, distant to you, or, you know.
So the proximity you may have with the person.
Absolutely. Practicing cultural safety as well is a huge thing. Like, is the person that you're approaching, what's their cultural background when it comes to having conversations of that nature? So practicing cultural safety, equipping yourself with the skills to understand, you know, what's appropriate, what's inappropriate. And then I guess that's like a pre-entrance into, you know, approaching the person. And when you do approach them, you know, approach them being, you know, approach them at a suitable time, at a suitable place, you know, express the fact that you want to listen to them, or you don't necessarily need to express that, but you need to show that you're listening to them. And when I mean listening to them, not listening to them just with your ears, but listening to them with your words.
Yeah, being present, I guess.
Being present, listening with your words, with your body language. All this kind of plays into what it means to listen to somebody. And subhanAllah, I was actually speaking to a psychologist, actually our team psychologist, and I was asking them, you know, I was presenting the framework that the mental health first aid course gives. And he was saying that he thinks, in his opinion, that listening is probably one of the most important aspects in terms of the action plan we give to participants.
Wow.
Yeah. Because again, we often...
We love to talk.
We love to talk. We listen to
opposite.
respond and not listen to understand, right?
Yeah.
And I give this example all the time. Like back, you know, in my staff room, I used to, you know, I'd be missing for a few days. Either I'd be sick, or, you know, my child would be sick, and I'd go back and, you know, and they ask me, you know, how's your kid? You know, is everything all right? Yeah. And, you know, at that point, I needed just an avenue to talk about, you know, the hardships.
Yeah.
SubhanAllah, like, you know, it provides a relief just knowing that the people there can serve as sounding boards.
Yeah.
And then straight away, the conversation will turn into something about them and their kids and their family. And then I was like, SubhanAllah, like, weren't you just asking me about myself? And that kind of, and then I'm like, all right, I better kind of step away from the conversation now. That was a bit, you know, a bit weird. And it kind of had me feeling like, did they really care about what I was going through in the first place?
I guess
Do you know what I mean?
You just like, I feel like that's so important, and it's so I guess it's so undermine the importance of this major act of just listening. And as you said, listening to actually understand and not listening to just respond. And I guess you reminded me of this, subhanAllah, just came to me right now, this story of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He comes into the masjid and he sees a companion, I think his name was Abu Umama, and he's just sitting all by himself. And the man's sitting all by himself, and the Prophet ﷺ is you know, he's intrigued. Why is this companion sitting all by himself? It's not a prayer time, and he's just, you know, no one's surrounding him. So what brings him? He asks him, you know, why are you here, Khali? And, you know, why do I see you alone? And he says, I think he said, humum wa duyun. He goes, I have so many worries and so many debt. And the Prophet ﷺ, you know, the fact he was just willing to listen. And when he does respond, you know, he gives him that famous dua, Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min al-hammi wal hazan. I seek refuge in you I seek refuge in Allah from sadness and grief. But I feel like there's that important note of just listening to someone and asking them, you know, how is everything? How are you going? And I guess that's where it all starts, man.
Absolutely. So yeah, I love that example that you gave. Even like
use it in your course now.
100%, especially with a Muslim audience. I think it will reverberate really well with them. And even like the Prophet ﷺ, even, you know, you said we're going to talk about like young people and their mental health, but even the way the Prophet ﷺ interacted with young people, you know, that story of the young girl that would take the Prophet ﷺ, you know, by the hand and, you know, allow him to walk the streets of Medina, right? And, you know, just the rahmah he had towards, you know, people of all ages, and showing them through his actions and his words. what it means to actually listen.
Well, I guess that the way we deal with young people, I guess, especially in today's day and age, it's so crucial because I guess from your studies and from what I've heard from you previously, we're seeing that mental health is on the rise at a exponential kind of rate. Like right now, mental health issues are
Absolutely
increasing rapidly. So we really need to be concerned about this. So, why is this the case?
Yeah. So statistically, I've gathered a few statistics around youth mental health, right? Youth mental health or youth mental ill health is the leading cause of disability amongst young people.
No, so mental health is considered a disability.
Not considered disability.
Illness,
sorry, no, it's not considered in terms of it disabling someone to fulfill relationships or to attend to their day-to-day needs.
Well,
the disabling factor. It's the leading cause of that amongst other illnesses. So there was a scale which was derived to kind of measure both physical and mental illnesses and their disabling factor or the disabling factor on individuals. And they found that mental illness was the major contributor. It's also the leading cause, or it's the leading burden of disease for young people. Wow. At 45%.
So why is this the case though? Like, why are we seeing now in 2020 that it's growing so fast? Like, are there contributing factors we should be aware of?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And again, it goes back to that question I always get asked,
what's causing it?
What's causing it? Exactly right. Even like amongst, my friends and whatnot, they talk about mental health, what causes it? Is it this or that? Again, it's a complex, the basic answer to that, it's a complex interplay between risk factors, whether it's biological, social, psychological, etc. Different factors, interplay with each other, interact with each other.
Wow.
And, that kind of can offset a mental illness.
Wow.
And with young people specifically, we know that, so much is happening in their life, in their world. Young people are growing up, they're reaching the age of puberty, they're entering adolescence at, 12 and 14, the average ages.
The puberty blues, they call
it. Yeah. And, that's an extremely important time for them. They're developing not just physically, but also psychologically and socially. And then there's all these other, external things that play into their development, whether it's, their social environment, the home that they're being brought up in, society.
Peer pressure. I think peer pressure in high school is like next to nothing. I don't think you can compare it with anything else. Just, in the classroom, there's so much, I guess, testosterone being thrown around and we're just like on that edge just because of the peer pressure that's around you
100%.
On a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with that. And again, social media plays another big role.
Yeah, that's the next big thing.
Yeah, and what tends to happen, so if you want to imagine that, back, 50 years ago, growing up was a lot different than growing up now. You had, teenagers entering adolescence, which was the age of, say, 12 to 17, that range, entering that, and then either finishing school and transitioning straight into work and marriage. And there was no delay between those two phases. Now you have a third phase in between. So you have adolescence, then you've got young adulthood. They've, the literature terms young adulthood, say from the ages of 18 to 29, and then adulthood starts at 29.
Wow.
So that phase in between, the young adulthood phase plays an extremely, it's an extremely important phase because it's a time of instability. You have individuals that, are educated and they're starting to go through their tertiary education, but also kind of transitioning into work. And, the median number of work changes for the average American was 8. So they'll have 8 career changes or 8 changes in their work environment on average in that time period. Right. Individuals are also kind of exploring the whole idea of relationships and wanting to seek that stability. So what tends to happen now is that there's that extended period before they get to adulthood has also given rise to a lot of, mental issues or mental ill health because of those expectations, the instability, and they can kind of offset certain ways of coping, whether it's through substance misuse or, feeling extremely anxious, and depressive disorders and whatnot.
Well, I guess there's just so much pressures on young adults, youth, teenagers, so to speak. And I guess it's coming from multiple fronts: the school, relationships, work, finances, and even like in the home, like maybe someone was mistreated by their parents, as you mentioned at the start of the episode. I feel like there's just so much things we need to look out for to ensure that we have that wellness in terms of our mental health. And I want to go a bit deep right now, and I want to give a bit of a disclaimer. This may be a sensitive issue, so those that are sensitive to the topic of suicide, I guess we can probably fast forward. I want to speak to you about suicide, not only in the wider community, but maybe even the Muslim community. I know it's a major taboo, right?
Absolutely.
But the fact is, it does happen. And I feel like, as an educator, you have a lot to contribute in terms of keeping people alive.
Yeah, for sure.
So
Yeah, and
what are the stats saying, and what can we do?
Absolutely. And again, as just reiterating what Kamal said, that this might be a sensitive topic, and it might kind of offset certain ways of feeling or bring back memories, etc. Or, even statistically, 50% of Australians would be touched by suicide.
Oh, wow. That's huge.
Whether it's someone in their local community, family, etc. So just keeping that in mind before we kind of progress. The topic of suicide is a very important conversation to have, in society right now. It is the leading cause of death in young people aged 16 to 24.
That's scary. That's a very scary statistic.
Yeah, and even the way suicide data is collected and, the declaration of a death by suicide, those measures are very narrowed. So a lot of experts are saying that this figure is even extremely conservative.
Wow.
Because if there's any doubt around a death by suicide, it's not counted. I guess, as a community, we need to kind of open up this conversation. Again, people don't like to talk about it. They just like to kind of put the haram label on it and push it to the side and feel like that's going to be enough to deter somebody from, engaging in the act or having those thoughts. Again, part and parcel of, hardships, extreme hardship, some individuals might have those thoughts of wanting to end their life and end the pain that they might be in. So as individuals, as neutral people that aren't in that state, we need to kind of keep a few things in mind. I think the first thing is, the language we use around suicide. Especially what's pushed out there, suicide being successful or unsuccessful, suicide being saying committing suicide. Yeah. I know this is kind of contentious. You have Muslims saying, but it is a sin, etc. Yeah. Even in that whole sphere, right? I've asked many mashayikh, or a handful of mashayikh at the very least, and there's always been that conversation around, somebody that enacts suicide. Have they done so out of, are they sane? Are they insane at that moment, etc.? And that affects obviously what gets counted after that, and that's in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's hand. So as Muslims, I think we need to kind of, separate the act itself from how we approach somebody that might be in that state. Yeah. Okay, so, all right,
I'm learning, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So someone's in that state, okay, it's haram, not haram, etc. But how do we approach the conversation, and how do we open it up with individuals, that might be suicidal because of, certain life circumstances, etc. So I think that's a starting point in terms of the conversation around how we should kind of open up the conversation.
And I guess if they do need help, you should, direct them to the appropriate people. Yeah. But at the same time, be mindful of, the fact that, yes, we know it's haram, we know it's a sin, but our goal in dealing or interacting with someone who has these thoughts is not necessarily to inform them that it's haram. Our goal is to save their life.
Absolutely.
And, whatever, by any means necessary, if you are going to save their life, the one who saves a life is like he's saved all of humanity, as Allah says in the Quran. That's the goal right now.
Yeah, for sure. And again, when we look at, the attempts, they say that roughly people who attempt suicide are 10 times more than the people that die by suicide.
Wow.
So you have individuals that, are high risk as well. For the individuals that do attempt suicide and don't die by suicide, they have to live with the guilt of, having to, for example, knowing that they failed at something that was going to end their pain.
Wow.
Do you know what I mean? So somebody that's in the state of feeling suicidal isn't necessarily someone that's rational, that's thinking straight, etc. They've been overwhelmed with extreme pain. And having that basic empathy to know that you can play a role in assisting this person is extremely important.
So have that empathy, that love,
Yeah.
I guess, show them that, hey, I care about you,
Yeah.
And I feel like that's like so pivotal, so important. And even like in the Quran, when Allah speaks about suicide, in that very verse, وَلَا تَقْتُلُوا أَنفُسَكُمْ, don't kill yourselves. The direct, ayah, the direct words right after that, وَلَا تَقْتُلُوا أَنفُسَكُمْ, do not kill yourselves. إِنَّ اللَّهَ كَانَ بِكُمْ رَحِيمًا. Allah is, with you merciful. Love first. Like I feel like if you should connect with them on that love and that empathetic kind of manner, you would be. I'm lost for words. Like I'm very sensitive with the way I address this, but I feel like that empathy is so crucial right now.
Absolutely. And again, empathy and having that that right mind frame, approaching that situation is extremely important. Again, coupled with the right skills. So having that framework to know how you need to help somebody. What are the different signs? Educating yourself around what are the signs and symptoms? What are the warning signs? How do you know somebody's approaching that point or is in that state?
Yeah.
How do you ask them directly or indirectly? These are all skills that we impart through our education courses. And subhanAllah, it's actually something that we're going to be working on equipping the imams with. So the same group, imams and community leaders, inshallah, once this COVID situation dies down.
Allah make it.
I mean, yeah. So actually giving them the skills, for example, they are skills that need to be, everyone needs to have them, not necessarily just one part of society.
I guess what I appreciate about this discussion is the fact that, you're coming from a field of, look, I'm ready to teach you. Yep. And I feel like on social media, there's a lot of shaming that goes around. Oh, you're not doing the right thing. Oh, this is wrong. This is not how you deal with it. But I guess like when we come from the field of educating people, I feel like it's so much more important and so much more effective, considering the fact that we're all learning.
Absolutely.
Like, there's no need for arrogance in terms of this issue. We're all learning. We all make mistakes. And on top of that, it's not easy. Dealing with mental health or dealing with people, loved ones, close people that have mental health issues. So I feel like we're not coming from we're looking down at anyone right here. We're here to teach everyone and we're all learning. We're all in this together, man.
For sure, 100%. And, and understanding that if someone does fall in that ditch or, goes through that tough time and are, clinically mentally ill, it doesn't necessarily mean they're going to stay like that for the rest of their life. They can, for every single mental illness, there's an evidence-based treatment for it. Whether it's through talking therapies or medication, etc. They've all been proven to assist somebody, and you can find plenty of examples online of individuals with their own lived experience of mental illness.
Wow.
Even on the topic of people that have attempted suicide, going out now and inspiring young people, sharing their story, and I think that's extremely powerful, right? Creating those spaces, those safe spaces to have these sensitive discussions,
I guess,
whether it's online or offline.
Yeah. I guess also when it comes to having these sensitive discussions, there is a bit of a stigma surrounding men seeking help or men coming out of their shells to, hey, I need some help.
Yeah.
So do you see that? Like
100%, yeah. But young boys, all the time.
Macho men.
100, recently actually in one of the cohorts that we ran, the teen mental health course with, it was a year 10 student. And, they were the most annoying kids to teach at the start. And I love those students, right? Because you win them over. And then by the third session, they were almost in tears talking about like how much this course meant to them and, their outlook on not just their own mental health, but what it actually means to be a mate, right? Because again, for guys or for men, being a mate isn't just about, it's just mainly about, socializing, etc. But it's not providing that emotional support or opening up about your emotions, which goes back to what you were saying about before. Men's mental health is such a massive topic that needs to be open.
Yeah.
Going back to suicide statistics, 75% of suicides are males.
Wow, that's scary, man.
Yeah. So, and again,
why is that the case? I guess you got to be.
There's different factors. I guess one of the main factors that really sticks out for me is the whole idea of how men are regulated to deal with issues. We're brought up from a young age to kind of hide our emotions and speak about things that don't relate to our feelings, and act in certain ways and deal with situations
Not
with your
willing to
anger.
seek that help.
Yeah. And what that tends to happen is it kind of hides a lot of, issues that might be there that might come out later.
Wow. And I guess there's also that heightened expectation upon men to perform, to make money. I guess there's that, I guess women have it too, but with men, I guess as a man, I can say that expectation is there. The community puts it there, the, social media puts it there, that as a man, you need to be successful.
For sure.
That can actually be quite detrimental for someone who isn't.
Absolutely. And again, obviously, if females have their own challenges and men have their own challenges. But on the topic of men, I totally agree with that. The challenges, are exacerbated by the expectations that society puts on us, for sure.
Well, I guess may Allah, alleviate all the problems and the mental health issues that people are experiencing around the world.
Ameen.
Ziyad, it's been an absolute pleasure discussing all these topics with you. I learnt a lot, and I sure hope everyone watching also learnt a lot. This was a sensitive issue. I was a bit hesitant to go in this, face first. I was a bit hesitant, but because I know that there's so much to learn when it comes to this topic, and I really thank you.
No, thank you so much for having me. And again, just a closing message. Thank you to OnePath Network for inviting me, and for any listener that's out there. This is an extremely sensitive topic. I urge you to kind of take control of your mental health, educate yourself around this topic, and make sure that you're equipped with the skills to, seek help or encourage others to seek the help that they might need to ensure that they are able to, better, thrive through life.
Jazakallahu khairan. Thank you so much
Thank
once
you so
again,
much.
Ziyad. Jazakallahu khairan. May Allah reward you for this service you're giving to the Muslim community. For all those that are watching, if you are suffering or you know someone who's suffering, we ask Allah to alleviate their pain. We ask Allah to enable them to experience wellness and really good mental health into the future. May Allah bless you all. Thank you for watching. If you did enjoy this podcast, don't forget to subscribe and leave us your feedback and suggestions for future episodes. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.